we are not alone.
These are supposed to be some of the most verified images of giants.
People who do meditation for 60 days will lengthen their telomeres.
Soon we'll get results, and we'll let you know right here on Beyond Belief. Things seem to be changing in the field of ufology.
It's going to be a bumpy ride.
That's priceless.
Isn't that amazing?
Tesla wanted free energy, and look what happened to him.
Plenty of evidence to show that they're real. The real question is how and why.
There were Egyptian hieroglyphs out in the outback of Australia.
In Australia. What are the possibilities? Mars was inhabited, and these were built. We almost can't duplicate today. These are amazing topics. What if there was something like at Area 51 deep underwater?
They were killed by some animal.
Believe me, we're just getting started. I'm George Norrie, and we here at Gaia are committed to revealing the truth. Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today.
Richard Serrett coming to you live from my home studio in Old Thornhill, just north of Toronto. Pioneering UFO and ET contactee George Adamski claimed he was visited by Nordic aliens. He wrote 3 books about his experiences. Now, his critics claim the supposed alien crafts in his films and photographs were cobbled together using light bulbs or other household items. Although Adamski was labeled a hoaxer, he continued to deliver his message from the beings he called the Space Brothers. He continued to insist aliens lived on most planets in the solar system. Nonetheless, his images of cigar-shaped motherships and strange craft flying in formation are among the most famous in UFO history. Coming up next, Dutch author-educator Gerard Artson insists that recent scientific discoveries confirm much of Adamski's seemingly outlandish claims. My conversation with Gerard Artson begins after this timeout on Coast to Coast AM. Gerard Artson is an author, speaker, researcher, and educator from Amsterdam. He's been a lifelong student of the ageless wisdom teaching, which holds that at the beginning or end of each cosmic cycle or age, a teacher returns with a new revelation about the source and evolution of consciousness that needs to be given expression by living according to the golden rule to establish right human relations. Gerard is also the author of 8 books and about the extraterrestrial presence, which he sees as further evidence of the evolution of consciousness and the universal manifestation of life. His research into George Adamski signaled a thorough reassessment of this major case of contact and led to his rediscovering of Adamski's work. Gerard is the author of Pioneers of Oneness, The Science and Spirituality of UFOs and the Space Brothers, and the Adamski book of UFO UAP Disclosure, Early Evidence and Answers Now Confirmed by Science. Gerard Artson, welcome to Coast. How are you?
Good morning, Richard. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. When Adamski came to America as a young man, I guess from Poland, was he interested in UFOs before his first, I guess, documented sighting in 1946, or was that something that came later?
Well, when he came to the States, he was a young boy, I believe, just 2 years old, and I doubt if he was aware of anything like flying saucers at the time, like almost no one was, despite, of course, these strange craft having been sighted through the centuries. And if he was interested later in life, he became a metaphysics teacher in around 1928, and established established himself in the Los Angeles area. And if he was interested in extraterrestrial life, then it doesn't reflect in anything that still exists in terms of his publications. His first published text signaling his interest in life outside planet Earth was titled "The Possibility of Life on Other Planets," and it was a brochure published in 1946, the same year that I think he made his first sightings, and shortly after followed by the first photographs that he took.
Right. So let's talk about. He had a ranch near Palomar Gardens in California, near the campground, the Gardens Cafe. October 9th, 1946, during a meteor shower, he and his friends. Well, you take it from there. What happened? What did he see? He and his friends, October 9th, 1946.
He saw if he saw what was witnessed by thousands of other people in the area, a spacecraft apparently, and this was reported on the radio, and he and his friends, they witnessed this strange craft, which they recognized as not being an airplane, as they were known then, and it was. I think it was just him and his group of his students and friends who were staying on that ranch, or there was, I don't know, it was in Palomar Gardens already. Let me check, and it was reported in various in various news outlets, small outlets, but in the area.
Right. This was a huge cigar-shaped craft that he saw and photographed.
I'm not aware that he photographed it.
He didn't photograph the first one. That came later. Okay.
Yes,
all right.
Yes. As far as I'm aware, yes. It was reported on the 18th of October in the Marine Corps Chevron and another local newspaper. It was during a meteor shower, but it was also witnessed by hundreds of other people in the San Diego area. And it was called a giant spaceship, and the Los Angeles Daily News also reported it, yes.
And it wasn't, how many years after, I mean, he started lecturing about, because he saw, I guess he claimed he saw something like 184 UFOs just passing over Palomar Gardens. In one night, right? 184 in one night.
Oh, that could be. I'm not, I'm not keeping tabs on all the details. I do know that in 1947 he took his first photographs of flying saucer as it passed across the moon. He had very in terms of current standards, very primitive equipment. He had a small lensless box camera that he was able to fit on his 6-inch telescope, and using that meant also that he, contrary to what he was accused of, he could not photograph nearby objects with that because there was simply no lens in the camera, and he took photographs that, as I show in my book, are very, very of things flying in the sky that are very similar to what the Pentagon has now recently authenticated as unidentified aerial phenomena.
Right. And he also started lecturing, I guess, in Southern California a couple of years later, 1989, UFO lectures. He was making, some people claim, some pretty outrageous claims, one of which was that that aliens exist on all planets in our solar system, even our the giant gas planets and so forth, and that scientists know that this is the fact. How is it possible that aliens, because he described Nordic, and we'll get into the Orthon a little bit later, but the Nordics and so forth, very human-like aliens, how they could exist on a planet like Saturn, for example, or these giant gas planets?
Yes. You're right. He started lecturing from October 1949 onward for service clubs like the Rotary, etc. And at the time, there were, various scientists who, because there wasn't much known in terms of findings through probes that were sent out. So it was a common assumption among scientists that there may well be life on other planets. I'm not sure if Adamski claimed that scientists knew what he knew, but what he knew is to do with the fact that, in my view, that science is not able, as it admits, to point out where 96% of the universe is. Science, astronomy has calculated the mass of the universe, and what they see in terms of gas and planets and galaxies. When you add all that up, it amounts to only 4% of the calculated mass. The rest is invisible to science, our present-day science. My contention is that Adamski knows about life on other planets that has not precipitated onto the dense physical planes of matter that we know here, the dense physical, solid physical, the liquid physical, and the gaseous physical. So we have to expand our view of life and how it manifests. And this is where I think the latest scientific findings come in. And of course, there are plenty of traditional materialist scientists who hold fast onto the empirical methods of our objective solid material reality, but that doesn't hold when you look at science's own findings. Adamski does say that life extends across the universe, and all the planets in our solar system are inhabited. And he's not alone in claiming that. The Ageless Wisdom teachings say the same thing. These are the teachings that were first reintroduced to the modern world by Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky in the late 19th century. Later expounded on by other people like Alice Ann Bailey and Helena Rerik and Benjamin Krem, and the limitations of our present day science make it impossible thus far to establish the perception of forms of life on other planets, but they are very much the same as life on our planet. And the circumstances are very similar. People live in houses. There's greens, there's trees, there's lakes and rivers, and what have you. Except they are not on the dense physical planes, but on what we know as the etheric physical planes. Now, that's Adamski on one side and the Ageless Wisdom teachings on the other side. But when you look at the latest findings in terms of system science and quantum research, they will tell you that the material reality as we know it is very elusive when it comes down to it. It is only our perception, the way we experience these things, that make them so solid. But that doesn't mean that there are very solid things that we can't see.
All right. We have to address some of the photographs that have been sort of held up as proof that Adamski was, a hoaxer or a fraud. And I'm sure you know the photos I'm referring to. There's one that looks all the world like some sort of a lamp. You can see light bulbs. They look like light bulbs underneath it. People point to that photograph. Others that appear as if the craft was kind of cobbled together with household items. Just talk to me about these criticisms that these photographs simply don't stand up to, say, scientific scrutiny.
Yes, you're referring to photographs, close-up photographs of what Adamski came to call Venusian scoutcraft, where you can see portholes and you can see sphere-shaped landing gear. The criticism started with Jim Moseley in 1955, who was publishing a newsletter, and he took one of Adamski's photographs, and there was an editor of Yankee magazine who said, "I'll prove this is a fake because, I take some household items and I make something that looks almost the same as what Adamski presents as a spaceship." Of course, Adamski had a whole series of photographs showing the same craft. Later, and these were taken mainly in 1953, and later on he produced a film. I don't remember if it's 8mm or 16mm film of the same craft hovering over a residence in Silver Spring, Maryland. And my problem with this proof of Jim Moseley, presented by Jim Moseley, is that just because you can make something that looks like what was photographed by Adamski doesn't make it a fake. There's no proof there. It supported military or official denials that excuse me. It supported official denials, of course, of extraterrestrials having sought contact and making themselves visible to various people, not just in California but around the world. And it is just a very poor proof of malice because it isn't, and the fact that you make something that resembles something else, that's not proof. That's just a creativity, perhaps. But it certainly denies all the various different photographs from different angles that Adamski made. Also, the fact that, as was established by photographic experts of his time, it was either real, the object that he photographed, or it was a full-scale model. Well, everybody knows that this was in 1953, and although he was beginning to become famous through his first book, co-authored with Desmond Leslie, it was 1953 when he took these photographs. He wasn't a rich man at all. So there was no way he could afford to have built a full-scale model with so much detail. And there was a whole string of photographic experts at the time who concluded that this must be the real thing. And the irony is that the critics, the detractors, they never managed to agree on exactly what item it was that he used for allegedly faking his photographs, because one said it was the top of an Italian ice cream machine, and another said it was the top of a humidor, a cigar humidor, and the list goes on. Most recently, it was someone who said that it was the top of a lantern, and that has also been debunked as the origin of Adamski's photos. So criticism just doesn't hold up.
Right. I'm looking at one here that's in the book. It's been referred to as Adamski's chicken brooder, a photograph he claimed to be a UFO taken on 13th of December, 1952. German scientist Walter Johannes Riedel said the photo was faked using a surgical lamp and that the landing struts were General Electric light bulbs.
Yeah.
So let's get to perhaps what Adamski is best known for, and that is his contact with a Venusian entity or Venusian alien that went by the name of Orthon, taking place back in 1952. Walk us through what happened in the Colorado desert.
It was actually Adamski who called him Orthon. He gave names to his contacts, who he said did not use names themselves, but for easy reference in his books, describing his encounters and what they were telling him, he gave these human beings, he called them human beings, his own names for his readers. And what happened, Adamski describes it, begins this episode in his part of the book, Flying Saucers Have Landed, by saying, it was about 12:30 in the noon hour on Thursday, 20 November 1952, that I first made personal contact with a man from another world. He came to Earth in his spacecraft, a flying saucer. He called it a scout ship. And so it was on the 20th of November when Adamski, with a group of 6 friends and students, set out for a picnic, a lunch in the California desert. They went into the Coxcomb Mountains, and just before noon, they parked the cars. They traveled in 2 cars. Adamski had also brought his telescope, and he had a Brownie camera. After they parked the cars, they first saw a cigar-shaped ship that was also entered in Project Blue Book as Special Report number 14. Not long afterwards, they saw what we know as flying saucers, scout craft, emerge from the mothership. And apparently one of these seemed to have landed or was going to land in the nearby foothills. So Adamski went over and to explore, and he felt himself in awe of being so near a craft, obviously from another world, until he says his reverie was broken when he suddenly realized there was a man standing not far from him, about a quarter mile away from him. And he said his trousers were different, like ski trousers, and he had long hair reaching his shoulders. So it felt it was he looked like a perfectly normal human being, although his fingers were tapered, he said, and he felt he clearly felt in the presence of a very wise being, someone who could see through him. And in their exchange, Adamski later explained that the being was testing his telepathic abilities, because later on it turned out that he could speak, but on in the first moments of their encounter, they were trying to exchange thoughts and ideas through gestures and not being able to, or seemingly not able to speak the same language. But later on, during his later contacts, he and not just Adamski, many of the contactees have said that the visitors from space are very good at picking up languages of the countries that they visit, and they also have a translation device.
And did Orthon communicate to Adamski that he was from the planet Venus?
Yes. He this was in the initial stages of their exchange. Adamski asked where he was from by first pointing to himself and then to the ground, planet Earth, and then pointing to Orthon, where are you from? And Orthon pointed at the sun, and then made an orbit, the gesture of an orbit, and a second orbit, and then pointed to himself. And from that, Adamski concluded that he was from Venus, which was later confirmed in words. Yes, he was from Venus.
And did Adamski try and take a photograph of Orthon?
I don't remember if he tried to take. I don't think in the moment he had the presence of mind to ask him for what we now would do is ask for a selfie. But he did take a photograph of the foothills on his way there, and recent enhancements of that photograph, which was made by a simple Brownie camera. Swedish photographer René Erik Olsen. He enhanced these photographs, and this particular one showed a part of the saucer sticking out from behind one of the hills, and a figure, not very clear, obviously, because there was a significant distance from which the photograph was taken, but there was the clear silhouette and features of a man standing nearby the saucer. So there's no clear photograph of what Orthon looks like.
I understand, though, there were plaster casts taken of Orthon's shoe imprints.
Yes. When Orthon had left, Adamski noticed, also because Orthon made a point of showing that he was leaving these imprints in the sand, in the ground where they had met, and Adamski noticed strange symbols in the footprints. And one of his friends that was with him, George Hunt Williamson, himself also an author and a researcher, did extensive research among the Native Americans in South America. He had a plaster with him, so they could make a plaster cast of the footprints.
Anything else unusual about them, or do they just look like shoe prints in the sand, or is there anything unusual about these plaster casts?
Well, they had strange symbols, and these symbols, if I'm not mistaken, were also found by George Hunt Williamson on one of his expeditions in South America. I'm not entirely sure if these were the ones, but it was some kind of attempt at letting us know certain things. But I must say I haven't really studied this particular part of the account. Because for me, Adamski's significance is much more in what he understood of life, and he was aware that consciousness is fundamental to our objective reality. So I've never been too much into the physicality of flying saucer or spacecraft. How long were they? What was the azimuth of where they were sighted? It's about why are they here? And if Adamski was teaching about the fundamental nature of consciousness in the 1930s and continued to do so throughout his life, despite critics saying that he came into the flying saucer business because that's where the money was to be made, that's complete nonsense, because in his books, or his book Inside the Spaceships, that relates many more of his later encounters from 1953 onward, he is told by his extraterrestrial contacts also about the fundamental of consciousness being fundamental to reality. And even in his latest books, Cosmic Philosophy and the Science of Life Study Course, he continues to talk about consciousness and the need for humanity to expand its consciousness and its understanding of life if we are to survive. He even said in a talk in 1955, the main thing is not about it's not about flying saucers or about me or any other phenomenon. The main thing is what is transpiring in this world today. And what is transpiring now is that humanity and the coming of the visitors from space is to do or is causing and should be causing an expansion of our awareness of life and the nature of life. So I'm sorry, but I'm not really into the specifics of the things that because all these physical things can be disputed and have been disputed, especially if you don't read what Adamski said about it himself. So many of the critics are just parroting the initial so-called analyses by Jim Moseley, and when you go into it, it doesn't hold up the criticism. And that's why, for me, the main part is the his vision, the visionary quality of Adamski. He was aware of what is going on in the world. He was aware that we're at a critical moment in our history. And as I said, he knew that there's more to life than just being born and dying. And that's it, and we have to make the best of it. Life is universal.
Right. Can you tell me?
I'm sorry. Science, and that's, I think, what I try to do in my book. Science is confirming these very fundamental notions that Adamski has been putting forward throughout his life and his career.
Okay, but if we could just go back to Orthon for a moment, because what was, can you share what Orthon's, primary message to Adamski was?
Yes, that's another interesting aspect of this first encounter. When Adamski asked him, "Why are you coming? When's your visits? Why are you coming here?" And Orthon then made gestures of the atomic clouds, and Adamski checked, "Are you here because of the atomic bomb explosion?" So, and it was also in the first report about this desert encounter in November '52. 4 days later, there was a report in the Phoenix Gazette. And it actually headlined, let's see if I can, here we are. Flying saucer passenger declares A-bomb blasts reason for visits. So it was one of the main reasons for this visitors from space to come at this particular time in our history. And of course, this has been supported by many other contactees who were told the same thing in the same time. There's plenty of other UFO researchers who have come to the same conclusion that we started noticing Foo Fighters on the tails of fighter jets in World War II, especially after the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And there have been numerous sightings of UFOs over nuclear arm bases and testing grounds, starting in the 1950s or maybe even the 1940s. And of course, I'm sure most listeners are aware of the press conference organized and the documentary made by Richard, what's his name?
Robert Salas? Robert Salas?
Robert Hastings. Robert
Hastings, right.
In
Yes.
2010. Who helped
the UFO incursion over Malmstrom Air Force Base that took place in 1967, and where they shut down a bunch of ICBM missiles, took them offline.
Exactly.
And there were others in 67 as well, Malmstrom and Minot Air Force Base as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Robert Hastings, for his documentary, brought together a group of 120 former and active military officers who were based at these nuclear missile facilities, U.S. military facilities, and they all witnessed the same thing of missile shutdowns involving UFO sightings. And his documentary from 2010 documents the same thing from unsuspected or unsuspicious, what do you call that? Sources that are reliable. These military men who have been trained thoroughly.
Right, so unimpeachable.
The same thing was already told to George Adamski and reported by George Adamski in 1952.
In I think 1955, Adamski wrote another book called "Inside the Spaceships." So, as I understand it, Orthon, this entity from Venus that he gave this name to, Orthon, arranged for Adamski to be taken aboard one of these crafts and taken on a tour of the solar system. Tell me about that.
Yes, from February 1953 onward, contacts after the first contact in November 52 resumed, and Adamski was regularly invited on board flying saucers, taken to motherships, and inside the spaceships is actually a very significant account of, especially the insights that the people from space, especially from Mars, Venus, and Saturn, shared with him and asked him to share with the world. And he did so in his book, Inside the Spaceships, that came out in 1955. Of course, he was enthralled and amazed, and of course, you can only imagine how he must have felt being on a spaceship and taken around the solar system or to around other planets, around the moon. And at the same time, he had already described very similar experiences in his book from 1949, Pioneers of Space, which he later described to a student as an out-of-body experience. So he must have had some idea of what it was like, but I'm sure it was a very different experience when you're in there, in the body, even if it was not the physical body, but the etheric body, the subtle body, that he, because, spaceships exist in etheric matter, or else they would be always visible. And they're clearly not. They can just drop into or out of our range of vision at will, apparently, and that I submit they do because they are able to lower the rate of vibration of their atomic structures, and Adamski describes the wonder that he experienced traveling to other planets, through the solar system. But for him, the significance was in the wisdom that was shared by his contacts and their insights into the human lot and the problems that are besetting humanity and the world at this juncture in history.
What did Orthon? Did he explain what their philosophy or spirituality was like?
Yes, but even more so, this was explained on 2 occasions, which he titled in his book "Meetings with a Master." To me, that refers back to masters of wisdom who are, the custodians of the wisdom teachings here on earth, and they are the members of the kingdom in nature that has evolved out of the human kingdom. Remember, we are talking about the evolution of consciousness, not just a paranormal enigma presented to us, to humanity, to entertain us or to crack our brains on. The coming of the visitors is to do with the evolution of consciousness, which doesn't stop at the human kingdom. After it has emerged from the mineral and the vegetable and the animal kingdom, the evolution of consciousness continues, as is also described now, found by the most advanced scientists at the moment in quantum research and consciousness research, and the wisdom that was shared by these, what he called masters from Venus and Saturn, is that life is universal. It is a continuous manifestation. Consciousness is life becoming aware of itself, so it's ever evolving towards a greater and greater union with the source of consciousness. And we find this again in the essentials of every world religion. It's a journey back to God in religious terms. The reconnection, which we find back in the word religion, religare, Old Latin. And in order to take the next step for humanity out of the dangerous zone that we are in now of ever increasing competition and conflict and the nuclear annihilation that is looming over the horizon again with the emerging conflicts in the world at the moment, which was even more immediate and urgent in the 1950s, of course, with the Cold War and the Soviet and U.S. At loggerheads with their nuclear arsenals. The way out of this seemingly perpetual state of conflict is to recognize that life is one and that we are one human family. We live, we share the same planetary home, and we need to find ways not to compete with each other, but with our past achievements, in order to create a world that offers a place under the sun for everyone, without having to resort to killing or armed conflict. That is the essence of the message that he was given.
Did Orthon say that? Did he pray? Did he pray to a creator? Believe in a creator?
They say that they don't necessarily pray, but they have their ceremonies in honor of the Creator, before listeners start shaking their heads and thinking, well, here we are again. There's George Adamski. He came up with some kind of New Age UFO religion. We find the same notions of a creator in the latest science. When you read the latest science in terms of quantum research, not just quantum mechanics, but the next stage in quantum research, you find that there's I'm reading a book now, very interesting. It's from 2009. It's by Dwayne Elgin, American author, and also has a scientific background. It's called The Living Universe, and the way he describes it is that what we know as individual consciousness is also at the basis of our objective reality, and that emerges from, there must be a source for that consciousness. And it's, our universe is just one of many, either incarnations of the universes or universes that exist at the same time. And so even the most advanced insights from science are talking about the Creator, and that is, and it doesn't really matter if you call it God. If you feel the need, you can pray to it, or you can worship it. But the best thing we can do is to try and find our own way to express and manifest as much of that original consciousness in our own lives. And we do that, as Adamski was told, as we find in the Ageless Wisdom teachings, as Professor Irvin Laszlo describes in his books, The Intelligence of the Cosmos, for instance, or What is Reality, the recent books by Professor Laszlo, is to realize that we are one human family and that we need to look after each other in terms of social justice. Every human being, every man, woman, and child in this world has the right to adequate housing, food, healthcare, and education. And if we decide as a human family to look after all of our family members, then there's no need for conflict. And it doesn't mean that we should resort to uniformity. Uniformity is the manifestation of fascism. Nobody wants fascism. Nobody in the right mind wants fascism. And it was certainly not what Adamski was told or heard from his space contact, that everybody needs to do the same and be the same and think the same, but that we have to pool our resources, our talents, and our everything that we've learned, our know-how, to build a better future for everyone, to contribute our talents to the common good, rather than trying to get the best only for ourselves. Yes.
Right. When Adamski was sort of touring the solar system on board these crafts, and he described things that he saw on the lunar surface, structures and so forth, were any of these verified? I mean, later there were reports of classified NASA photographs that were photoshopped to remove certain structures, but people inside NASA claim they saw things on the moon, on the surface of the moon, structures, man-made structures. Do any of those reports line up with what Adamski reported seeing on the moon back in the 50s?
Well, I'm aware of these classified photographs or things reported, recorded, also by astronauts. But they are classified. And with respect, it's the same as with his photographs and the footprint casts and any other kind of evidence that Adamski presented in his time. They've been forever a source for debate. And if you'll allow me, when we step back for a minute, what emerges is a picture of an increasing number of confirmations of the general notions that Adamski put forward in the 1950s. We discussed the photographs at the beginning of the show. The photographs or the video evidence from the Pentagon that was leaked from U.S. Navy jet fighter board cameras are very similar to what Adamski photographed already in 1950. Anomalous materials are now being researched by a Stanford professor, Gary Nolan, and also in the 1950s, Adamski said he had anomalous materials that he had analyzed. his story of contact from that we discussed earlier, there are now various scientists who say that contact has been made, who confirm that contact has been made, even though they say, the extraterrestrials have asked not to make it known because humanity is not yet ready. You'll remember in December 2020, it was the Israeli former head of Israeli space program who made the headlines. The nuclear concerns that was reported in the first report about Adamski's contact in the desert, later confirmed in 2010 through Robert Hastings' documentary. The fact that life is universal, Adamski said humanity can be found all over the universe. Now scientists are saying, evolutionary biologists say, well, the likelihood that life evolves to the point that they are very much like what we know as human beings is actually the favored bet in the universe. All these things, the fact that consciousness is fundamental to our reality, confirmed by quantum research, all these things added up show that George Adamski was a visionary. And again, I understand people's fascination with evidence, but I'm just not. I haven't been cleared for to see the NASA photographs, classified photographs of the moon's surface.
No, but you've heard about the reports that have come out from supposed whistleblowers describing what they saw on the moon in these photographs, structures, buildings and so forth. I was just, I guess, getting at whether that lined up with what Adamski claimed he saw on the moon as well. Gerard, did George Adamski make any predictions about when a disclosure might happen or how it would happen, under what circumstances?
He was expecting, at various points, what we now call disclosure. And obviously that hasn't happened. And of course, official disclosure is necessary. But when you actually read what Adamski has to say about life on Earth and in the universe, it is not essential official disclosure for knowing what's really going on. He, as I pointed out, Adamski was aware of the junction in history that we're at as a human race. And we need to make a step in our consciousness. Grant Cameron, the well-known also Canadian researcher, said that consciousness is the elephant in the room when it comes to full disclosure. And Adamski is the only one of the early contactees who was teaching about the nature of consciousness even in the 1930s, and continued to do so throughout his life. And he also described how consciousness was used in the craft that he was invited on to operate the instruments and the ships. There's and that's why I called my book the Adamski Book of UFO UAP Disclosure. There's several things have been confirmed now by science, by philosophers, by activists, by the military. And when we keep looking at these separately, we don't really get a full picture. But when you add them up and you see that Adamski had already disclosed these things in the 1950s, sometimes even earlier, then it becomes clear that he was a visionary, and that the purpose of the intentions of the visitors from space clearly is not to cause harm, or else they would have done so, as Robert Salas also stated in the Robert Hastings documentary. They're clearly capable of doing damage, and they haven't, except for shutting down missiles that were later back online, without problems. They are here in support of a momentous time in human history, and it is up to us to realize, to make a step in our conscious awareness, in the way we relate to each other, to our fellow human beings, relate to the planet in order to save it. We're destroying our own planetary habitat as we speak. We have been. Adamski has been pointing that out also, and had it told to him by his contacts from space in the 1950s and the 1960s. And we've allowed the big corporations to buy up new inventions, zero-point energy inventions, and shelve them so that they could continue to make profits on the fossil and nuclear fuel industries. Disclosure begins by acknowledging that Adamski was correct in many of the fundamental notions and things that have now been confirmed. And if we continue to ignore his information and his account, we perpetuate the ignorance that was imposed by the disinformation campaign that was designed to confuse and scare the public about the extraterrestrial presence on Earth. Yes, he was expecting disclosure, official disclosure, and he was also expecting this transition into a better future, without armed conflicts. And he was expecting that was even in 1940, I believe. He was expecting that would take place in about 30 years, and obviously that hasn't happened because it depends on our humanity's ability and willingness to take a good hard look at ourselves and how we relate to life and to our environment and our community and our neighbors, whether it's our neighbors next door, our neighbors in the next country over, and the people that we have been allowed to be exploited just for capital gains.
Gerard, thank you so much. I had a great time. I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you very much, Richard. It was a pleasure.
Gerard Artson, the Adamski book of UFO UAP Disclosure. All right, for George Norrie, George Knapp, Lisa Lyon, Stephanie Smith, Tom Danheiser, Dan Galanti, Michael Cozio, Donna Walker, Chris Boros, Tim Banal, Sean Ladisor, and in Brantford, Ontario, Scott Park. I'm Richard Serrett. Thank you for your ears and your voices, your beautiful voices.
The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.